Okay, it looks like we have everybody here. Took me a minute to find everybody. All right, it is 6 p.m. February 8th. I almost said 28th. February 8th. Let's get this meeting started. Today we'll be conducting a school board meeting of the Amherst School Board. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chairperson of the Amherst School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-4 and its extensions, this body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom and via phone by following the directions and links provided on our website, www.sau39.org. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email A Wallace, that's AWALLACE at sau39.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So let's get started. Josh?
Yep, Conklin, home alone.
Tom?
Tom Gothier in his home office alone.
Terry?
Beam, home alone as well.
Ellen?
Gurjan, home alone.
And Kuzma, I am also home and alone. Okay, so moving on, we have reached our first public comment of the evening. If any member of the public wishes to speak, please raise your hand using the digital feature and we'll call on you. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Danae, I would like, I have already sent you a few emails that were emailed to the board to be included in the minutes for this meeting. So I know that you have gotten those. Moving on, the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Josh, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any questions or discussions about the consent agenda? Tom?
I had 2 points. One for clarity. If you go to the minutes from the meeting on January 19th, on page 19 of the packet that we had, our agenda packet, line 176, just a point of reference, it says that we do have the ability to start drafting and creating a communication plan. We do have a plan in place. There has been work by the PR committee for the Joint Facilities Committee. So just a point of reference that plan has been in the works. The 5 of us may not have been up to date on all the aspects of it, but I did at least want to recognize that they had a plan. And then on page 20, the next page, line 208, in the minutes, it references Mr. Conklin believes that there's still money left in the coffers from the initial 105,000. It's just 150,000. So it just needs to be, the 5 and the 0 need to be flipped, just to indicate that it was a full 150. I think we spent 105, if that sounds about right, but the original number was 150. So from our last meeting, there is some left over.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments on the consent agenda? So we can actually approve the consent agenda with those, with the understanding that those changes will be made. So if you would, Josh, if you would like to amend your approval of the consent agenda, just you know, making the motion that you're approving it with those changes.
Yes, I will make the motion with the changes Mr. Gothier presented.
Okay.
I can second that.
All right. So let's roll call. Josh,
Conklin, yes.
Tom,
Gothier, yes.
Terry,
Beam, yes.
Ellen,
Grugin, yes.
and Kuzma, yes. All right. So moving forward is actually the JFAC discussion. We are actually going to be meeting and discussing tonight with Amy and Shannon should be in the meeting, and we can move them over as panelists. They have a small presentation for us for their current PR plan. And as a board, we can discuss how, you know, if there's anything additional that as boards, you know, as a board, we would like to specifically work on, but also how we can work with them on this plan and be included as part of that. So Amy and Shannon, take it away. And you should be able to have access to share your screen if you'd like. Amy, you're muted.
I'll get that one of these days. All right, so Shannon's going to drive the presentation. So we just have a short slide deck. We just want to go over, you know, kind of where we are and go over some in detail, some good information on what the PR committee has done so far, and then just go over setting the stage for our plans for the future for this year.
Perfect.
So I'm not going to belabor this slide. We've all seen all the folks, but just for folks at home, understand that this is this committee represents a wide variety of stakeholders, board members, community members, the SAU, Board of Selectmen, and yeah, I think that's it. All right, so just a brief, really quick process overview, mostly for folks at home. I know you all are aware of where we are on the board, but our process over the last several years, we have reviewed the history of facilities and the work of what the previous JFAC committee completed. We formed subcommittees, and we'll go into a little bit deeper depth on those later on in the presentation. We worked to inform the voters of the architectural and engineering fees that were on the 2020 ballot. We as a committee have met monthly as a full committee. We received updates from subcommittees and met regularly each month with LaValle Resinger continuously from January 2020 till the present. And I say monthly, it's been more than that. We formed subcommittees as needed, and we have spent time with all of the boards, Amherst, SAU, Sohegan. We presented at the Board of Selectmen, and we actually also presented at Mount Vernon. And this is just a representation of the subcommittees that were formed. So we had a finance committee that looked at the bonding and created the debt calculator. We have a very robust public relations committee that has done a lot of work that Shannon will share with you, and understand that that will be where our primary focus will be this year. We had a subcommittee for Sohegan 2.0 that looked at the needs that Sohegan was able to make some really good decisions on what to include in the budget versus what would be in the expendable trust fund. And then we'll be looking at next year what projects we expect going forward. We also had a construction cost subcommittee that once we received the estimates from Harvey Construction as a cost estimator, we dove very deeply into all of those costs and were able to make some reductions and some changes. So we thought that was obviously time very well spent. So I just want to say before we go forward and I turn it over to Shannon, I think we have a pretty good representation of board members on these committees, with the exception of the construction cost subcommittee. I'm on there, but as a Sohegan board member, I think it would be really helpful to have someone from the Amherst board be on that subcommittee, because I think we are definitely going to take a closer look at the construction costs and just do another deep dive into that. So when we get to the end of the presentation, we can talk about that, but I just wanted to plant that as a seed. I also think that we should have someone from the Amherst School Board on the finance subcommittee. So again, I'm on there representing the SAU and this committee and Sohegan, but I think it would behoove us to have someone from the Amherst School Board on that subcommittee as well.
And Amy, I just want to chime in.
Yeah,
they're not listed under the construction costs subcommittee, but the school administrators also participated in those line by line sessions as well, which was really, really.
Yep. All right, and with that, I will turn this over to Vice Chair Ms. Gascoigne, who also is chairing the all-important public relations subcommittee.
Thanks, Amy. So just a little quick overview to highlight our work to date. So we provided Amherst citizen updates. We developed and distributed a community survey over the summer, which you all have received earlier in the year, and then another copy of that recently. But that yielded just over 1,000 responses. And really the idea of that survey was to establish a baseline for the understanding and perceptions around our buildings in the community. We identified stakeholder groups for Zoom presentations. Our next steps were to begin presenting once the bond was moving forward. So to this point, we hadn't actually met with any of those groups outside of the Amherst PTA. We developed a website and content, established a Facebook presence, developed infographic and informational flyers in draft stages, which we'll take a look at here in a moment. We have a Q&A video series that was in the works to share on the website, social media, etc. We found with the 2020 A&E fees on the ballot, it was very helpful and informative to have a video with a virtual tour of the building. So given the current COVID situation that we're in, making it difficult to go out and meet and greet with folks in person, this was kind of our response to that, was to develop a video series that would cover different topics, such as the educational aspects of what we're looking to achieve in the school buildings, the health and safety aspects, what the buildings would look like, what all that involves, the finances, student perspectives, parents and alumni perspectives on the building. We provided slides and information for the public hearing, and we did do a soft launch of the website through an established NICSL channel for Joint Facilities Advisory Committee. We had around 385 emails that folks gave us when we did our summer community survey of folks saying they were wanting to remain engaged. And so we started the soft launch of the website with that group of folks there, along with the current parent body. through Nixle. These are just a few samples of some of the work that we had in play. I think you're all familiar. I hope you're all familiar with the website. But on the left is an infographic that we would be pushing out in a variety of ways. This one's more to use in a social media type platform. And then we were planning to piggyback on that to build a flyer, like a trifold flyer to go to every house in Amherst. So again, given the situation that we find ourselves in, we don't want to limit ourselves to social media or a website. A direct mailer to every resident in Amherst was on our agenda and remains on our agenda. That needs to happen now that we have a longer runway, more than once, I think is really important. To Amy's point about the construction cost committee, this would obviously be something that we want to make sure that is completely refined before we send this out, but not something that we want to ignore. We definitely, direct mail is a big part of what we're hoping to do. So our next steps that are now that we kind of put a pause on were to finalize and distribute an informational mass mailer, film our speaker series. And the idea behind that with the shorter runway was that we were planning to launch just a weekly topic-based video each week. So that may look a little different now that we have more time. So we can continue to talk and think about that. Host Zoom sessions with stakeholder groups. So just an idea of some of the stakeholder groups that we had identified: town commissions, Amherst Garden Club, Lions Club, Republicans, Democrats, Friends of the Library, neighborhood groups. You all know we have an active and vibrant community. So we've really kind of broken out all those groups and started identifying who on the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee could reach out to those groups. And right now, obviously, Zoom is our best bet. Push the website via social media, email list, informational flyers, etc., and then just continuously improve and update the website. Something that's really great about the website, there is a place for the community to ask questions. So, you know, we haven't received any to date. Again, we've just done the soft launch, but as we do, if we see a question that's continuously coming in, rather than answering that one off, we can just add it to the FAQ on the website, and it helps us gain a better understanding. So that's kind of what that last bullet speaks to, is just that continuous monitoring and updating and making sure that, you know, as much information as we have, we can share with the community. So now, Amy, I'm going to kick it back to you for the last two slides, unless any.
You're muted again.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Shannon. And maybe, you know, obviously we can do have a discussion at the end of this. So our suggested structure and next steps are all of these items on this slide. So in an effort to create a bridge for better communication, Beth and we have scheduled bi-weekly meetings. So those are on the books for us, just to talk about, you know, anything happening that I need to bring back to JFAC, or anything that she needs to bring back to the board in between our regular meetings. We would like to continue to have 2 Amherst School Board representatives on the committee. And then as we move forward with the public sessions with stakeholders, we would like to strive to have at least 1 board member attend those sessions. When we've done efforts in the past in the community, it's always been really helpful to have members of the SEU, board members who are there to answer questions directly. So we will be providing specific subcommittee presentations or briefings to the Amherst School Board. We would request that all members of the board become familiar with the master plan report and the executive summary from LaValle, Bresinger, and JFAC. So some light reading for you folks. And then, as I mentioned before, we would like to have a board member embedded on the subcommittees that that we spoke about. I know that there are folks on public relations. People may want to stay, but just want to make sure that all of our bases are covered with those. And then we will continue to schedule time on your board meetings for an update and Q&A session with our subcommittees in particular, if you want that, and inviting LaValle Bressinger as well. So this slide really maps out the roles and responsibilities for the three components really of our plan moving forward. So I can go through these if you want. I don't know if you all had a chance to look at them ahead of time, but I think it is really important that we make sure that everybody's clear on our roles and responsibilities so that, you know, we don't assume that someone else is taking care of something when it's actually another unit's responsibility. I've found that that's typically where projects get into trouble when we're making assumptions that someone else is taking care of it. So I can go through these if you think it would help, Beth.
Maybe some just really quick like highlight points. You know, I think we obviously know we have to set the financial aspect and things like that, but maybe a couple of quick.
Yeah. So I guess we're really looking for the JFAC has done their work in terms of articulating and identifying the long-term facilities needs along with the SAU and with LBA, and we've made our recommendations to the boards. We've developed a platform and we're working out the public relations plan, and we'll continue to communicate with the Amherst School Board as we move forward. We really see the SAU as being most responsible for working with the board on the financial and legal elements, especially of the bond financing and the contract, any contracts that we have. The SAU has been really helpful with working with our subcommittees to provide information and also to help us to coordinate specific outreach that in terms of some financing for info mailers and messages. And they've been great as far as loaning us some staff members, including Michelle and Roger at various points. So we would just be looking for the board to really set the direction and the priority of this project and provide us with that specifically. And I say us, I mean the JFAC. And the board would be overseeing the financial and contractual obligations, setting time for us at your meetings, and coming to us with specific questions or concerns, or as it says, even ideas that arise as we go forward. And as we spoke, continuing to work or starting to work with the PR committee throughout the year at the various events. So I know I said I wasn't going to go through it, and then I did.
It's all good.
I have a hard time picking and choosing. I think they're all equally important to understand. So I guess I would like to hear if you think that we're off base in any of these, or if you think these all make sense, so that we can make sure we move forward with clarity throughout the year.
Perfect. So what I'll ask the board, because it's an easy question, is JFAC off base with anything that they just stated? Rather than everybody saying, oh yeah, I totally agree. Is there anything that was missed or that the board feels is a little off base on that? Terry, your hand is raised.
I don't think it's off base. I actually think it's something that was really important there is that JFAC has done an amazing job and collaboratively, but as a unit, really giving us these great materials and these great talking points. But I do think that I can't stress enough that if there's a presentation, there needs to be the board member there. Like, we can take turns, that's a place where small groups are where I feel like I shine, that we're going to be presenting at deliberative still the plan, and we are going to be doing that at a high level. But I think that these small groups, it should really never just be JFAC there alone. That you need to have one of us there saying, no, we absolutely believe in this. We can speak to it. We support this, and this is what we're all about this year. So that one is kind of in the middle of the row there, but if I had to pick one of everything, that is really the one. And I do just have a question on financing. Do we need to raise some money to send mailers? Because I don't think that's something that would normally pay for through just district funds, right? So do we need to do some kind of heaven help us fundraiser to try and get that?
Yeah, I would look to Adam or Michelle to answer that. But before they answer, I want to say thank you, Terry, for highlighting that, because I couldn't agree with you more that is absolutely essential to have representation from board members. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, think about the voter's guide that we send home, where it is factual, there is no opinion included, and it is not meant to influence, but instead meant to provide information to voters. That is something that is appropriate for school district funds. Anything beyond that would have to be provided with private funds of some kind, through a fundraiser, a separate organization, outside group, anything like that.
Okay, thank you so we could have more than one mailer possibly going. We would just have to be careful about what we put in which.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good question, Terry.
Any other things that the board might feel is a little off base to start with, or is missing? Okay. And then, so I think it's fair to say that everybody thinks you guys are definitely on the right track. I know I do with this. Really quick, because I know I tend to work backwards with the most recent information first, and this was brought up towards the end, is Adam, when it comes to JFAC and board members being included on it and things like that, typically we've always followed the process that 2 board members, so that's less than quorum, is on any specific committee. However, I think that we're hitting the point that I think there's more, and we might need more on it, but I'm not sure exactly how to follow through with that. What are our abilities to have quantities? So, right now, Ellen and Tom are on the subcommittee, but maybe it might be worth it for me to be on the finance or the construction costs, and Terry to be on the PR kind of it, so that when the entire committee gets together, it's more than 2, but within each small section, it's less than 2. I just kind of wanted your feedback on that.
Yeah, so the law is clear that the chairman of the board has to provide the snacks for all subcommittees. That's first. But beyond that, so there's no restriction on the number of board meetings that a board can have. So as long as anytime there's an official meeting with 3 or more board members, it's posted as a meeting of the Amherst School Board, or it's posted as a meeting of XYZ committee. That's fine. It just has to be posted, noticed, minutes, all of that. So there really is no restriction there. It's in general, it's bad form to have 3 or more members participate in a subcommittee, because then they're acting as the board in that subcommittee, because it's unlikely that if 3 members that are a subset of the school board vote in favor of a particular thing, then the full board doesn't really have actual authority to make a decision at that point, because the majority have made the decision on behalf of the board.
Okay. So
Do the subcommittees meet at different times than the general JFAC committee? So like,
They do.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't think that that would be a problem then in that regard, because so long as we spaced ourselves out among the subcommittees.
Mhm.
Yeah, we just need to figure out who's in the overall.
Yeah, if it was, well, the general, I think, can stay until we do new committee assignments in June. So if they were willing to stay as the general ones, and then it would just be like you, me, and Josh subbing into the subs that don't already have coverage, because I agree, there should be one of us on everything at this point. There just should be.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure I got that answer before we went too deeply into too much of the other stuff, because I didn't want to forget to go through that, because that's an important question. Josh.
Excuse me. So I have a number of things, but I'll start by saying I'm happy to jump into the cost subcommittee and just start doing that now. I'm also, if people think I'd be better placed in finance or someplace else, I'm happy to do that. But I think we should just figure out who's going where so we can just move forward with that.
Okay. All right. Amy, is it helpful to bring up that, or Shannon, I don't know who has control over that presentation.
Yeah, Shannon's driving.
But to bring that slide back up of what the separate
The subcommittees.
subcommittees are at this point, so that we
Yeah.
can see who's in them.
So you don't need to be on Sauhegan 2.0.
No. Okay. We can. No. So let me see. Right now we have Ellen and Tom in PR. If they're both want to continue in PR, that's great. If not, one of you could jump out and we could put in somebody else. That's great too. Ellen.
I would love to. After my stay on the board is over, I planned hopefully to continue to support PR. So I'd
Okay.
love to stay there.
Okay, that's fine.
I
Unless
can move if
one of you
needed.
has to leave. Huh?
I can move if needed, and then I can still help out with the videos and stuff with PR too. It honestly doesn't matter to me. So I can do construction costs and or I can do, I don't know which one Josh had talked about because they're both cost based, but I can just do the opposite one. And then I can help out with PR stuff and videos when needed.
Okay. So
That's if no one else wants to fill the other subcommittee.
You've been instrumental on our PR subcommittee. I'm just going to put in a plug. So is that
Perfect.
And again, I'll gladly stay. I just want to make it so we can get everything covered.
So it sounds like, at least for now, everybody, that should stay as is. Depending on how elections go in June, we might, want to reconsider that, like move some things around. So that I think should stay as is, it sounds like, for now. So we're looking at finance and construction committee, the construction cost committee. Josh, I don't know. I actually kind of wonder if, so the finance more specifically is talking about, it kind of looks more into how the bond works. I just want to make sure, Amy, this is actually a question. It's more of the understanding the bonds, understanding all of the, research that Brian did with housing costs and housing price, all of that aspect, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And
Yeah, and then construction is really doing another look through of the plans and the estimates that Harvey put together.
Okay.
They're both equally fun.
Right. So really, we're this is sort of like a conversation between Terry, Josh, and I, sort of. I know I'd like to take I'd like to take a look at the construction costs myself. But at the same time, I don't want to remove anybody or take away anybody's option. But I do think though that having somebody that's really, Josh, I'm really wondering if you should be in that finance area, I guess is where I'm going with this. Just having somebody that really, truly, deeply understands that.
As a poet, I am well versed in finances, and not having any. I'm happy to go wherever. I mean, and I think I can, I can understand numbers and I can talk to people about numbers. So I'm happy to go there if you feel like that's where I'm best placed.
And I also, so it's actually,
you can have two. So
Yeah.
it's really, you don't need to limit yourself to one.
I'm actually, so Tom.
And folks can sort of, if they can trade off, if it's busy. So you could have a couple people in finance and a couple in construction.
The idea was just throwing out Josh and Tom in finance. Tom, I don't know if you've got the bandwidth for that. And Terry, you and I in construction cost.
Yeah, that's fine.
That works.
Tom, do you have the bandwidth? I mean, you and Josh can switch off, but I think having more than one person with the information at any given point of any of this is really important.
Yep, that's fine.
I think. Okay, so we'll do Tom and Josh in finance, Terry and I in construction, and the construction costs. And then as we after June with elections, we'll see what happens and how to, if we need to shift things around a little bit or add somebody else to different areas or whatever. So, okay.
And I think that
go ahead. Sorry, Terry.
Oh, that's okay. And I just jumped in anyway. For any of the presentations to any other groups, I think that we can kind of look at the calendar and see who's available where. I know that I've got some flexibility around that, I think.
Yeah, so I was actually, there was another slide where you showed, I think it was the one with the 3, where it showed the JFAC, the SAU, and the board. I think that's the one I'm thinking of, where it just really talked about where there was one that showed where the board could be most helpful at this point. And I agree with Terry that really once we have a little bit of a schedule, we can have at least 2 board members at each one of them. Or sorry, at least 1, maybe even 2 is where I was trying to say.
We'll get you added to those meeting invites so that you can work that out.
Yeah. And then, oh, thank you. So we've got that. I'm just reading through. So yeah, so Amy and I already have our meetings, our biweekly meetings set up. So we're going to start that this week.
Yep.
And then we're going to make sure that at least for now, we're going to put JFAC discussion on all of our board meetings. And then Amy and I can kind of discuss whether it makes sense for her and or Shannon to show up, or if it's just a quick update for whichever one of us. But for every single meeting, we will be doing a JFAC discussion, an update of where we are, what community meetings we might have coming up, all of these different things. We have, so we're carving out specific, and it's going to be called out specifically on our agendas from here on out, until we hit the point that maybe it doesn't make sense to specifically call it out because there's a lull or whatever. But at least we'll acknowledge it for a while. I don't expect hitting a lull at any point soon. Josh, your hand is raised.
Yep. So in an effort to be the least popular board member, I'm going to suggest that these bi-weekly things end up becoming as much of the board as possible, because I think this is such a huge lift that I think we run into danger if we wait a month every time before we all get together. Sometimes it might only be 3 of us, but sometimes it might be 4. But I feel like with these meetings, getting as many people there and having a quick huddle they don't have to be 2-3 hour meetings. Our administration doesn't have to be there if they're busy. But I feel like pulling us in and together quickly so we all can get on the same page every 2 weeks rather than every month on this particular issue may be worth exploring and thinking about.
So I think that I'm trying to figure out because right now we're also going to have all of our various JFAC subcommittee meetings that we're going to be attending, and I don't know how often those are running, and how often those are and depending on which ones. I think agreeing to that at the moment might be a difficult decision, just because it might be a difficult decision. I don't know. Ellen, you have your hand raised? My brain's thinking. Ellen?
Yeah, maybe just off what Josh is saying, I agree, especially if what Terry mentioned, each one of us want to try to be at more public communication meetings with small groups. I would love to see maybe that meeting between the ASB chair and the JFAC chair have minutes so that we can review them before our meetings. It might help with questions and such too. So I think I've been on JFAC, there are a lot of meetings, which is good. And, we obviously, as you can see from the presentation, a lot was done. Amazing, a lot. So I think maybe, and I don't know about you, Beth, I would maybe be concerned at the number of people attending, then it would need to be a public meeting. So maybe if just some minutes, maybe even if, the chairs took minutes and provided a summary to the board members right after, not a week after or such, just so it can be reviewed, so questions can be asked before the ASB meeting.
Yeah, we can do that. Honestly, Beth and I just set these up just as a quick touch point, and it's every other week, at lunchtime for half an hour. So if you wanted to have something more expansive, we would have to do that in the evening. So either way, but maybe to start, I think that might be a good suggestion, Ellen, where Beth and I have quick meetings. We'll take notes for you all. I'm a terrible note taker, but I'll try. Maybe we'll take turns and we'll get those off to board members. And I speak to the chairs of the subcommittees as well, and we could provide them with that information too.
Yeah, and I think if there's going to be a focus on one particular subcommittee, say it's PR, or then if Beth wants, instead of having the chair to be at each meeting, maybe that person represents as well.
Yeah.
But I think you guys are probably capable of communicating what goes on.
Yeah, I see this as maybe a little, just kind of a casual touch point, like, hey, okay, are we missing anything? What's happening? What's, anything really important that we need to focus on, just to open up the lines of communication. That was really the goal of that. So.
Josh?
Yeah, so I think that gets at the heart of what I'm worried about. What I don't want to do is play catch up every month where we're having to all sort of figure out what have you been doing and what have you been doing. So if we're all looped in to the process, then I think that could work. And, we don't have to decide on, meetings right this second. So I think if we're doing that, then that should provide the kind of insight that I was looking for.
So I think that part of our job as a board is to report back at our meetings what we have been doing in our subcommittee meetings, which is why we have the subcommittee reports on each of our agendas. And because that is what we're supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be updating them, and really everybody, it's the community as well, for open transparency and stuff like that, bring it all back together at each of our individual, at each board meeting is when we're supposed to be doing that. So, Ellen.
So that's just exactly. And I think it is sometimes difficult when you know, all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, my subcommittee. It might be really helpful. Again, streamlining the meetings. I know that's a goal of the chairs. For each person on their subcommittees to take notes and provide those notes prior to the meeting to everybody, so that if questions need to be addressed prior to the meeting, or then that's person who has that subcommittee, such as PR, myself. If people had a bunch of questions, I could go over them. So maybe each subcommittee member just writes up their own little summary of what happened at the meeting, what's happening. And that could even get entered into the consent agenda too. Just for more transparency for the public, and then streamlining the meetings as well.
Yeah. Adam, what is the laws and policies around that? Or maybe even Amy, are this just separate, smaller JFAC subcommittees taking minutes at all of their meetings? I'm assuming so. Or Shannon?
Yep.
Yeah, so I can speak for PR, and we've kept minutes.
Yeah.
And you know, we're set to start weekly meetings again. We were at a place where we were ramping up, and our plan as a PR committee following public hearing, we had weekly Wednesday evening check-ins scheduled. Again, it's kind of like how Josh mentioned, not a 3-hour meeting every week, but you know, 30 to 45 minute kind of check-in, because we were all starting to splinter off, and a couple folks were working on a flyer. Some folks are going to be working on a video series, and these things start moving very quickly. And if we're needing to wait for permission from a full board, then that is where the drag could become an issue. So as you all deliberate the best way, you know, to move forward, that's just my concern from the PR perspective. Once the construction costs subcommittee has met again, and the board is satisfied on the, you know, refined cost and scope, then that's when PR will need to pick up the pace and continuously be reaching out to the community in a variety of ways. And, you know, I don't know if publicly posting those subcommittee meetings makes it easier for you all, or, you know, what the right way to operate there is, but we do have, and we have been taking minutes that I'd be happy to share. Any older minutes or just, you know, the new ones moving forward. That helps you at all.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, you brought up a really good point, because we don't want to us becoming so involved should not hinder you guys in any way from doing your work. You know, at the same time, if there's, you know, instances where you have to get full board approval for something, obviously, you know, I think that's part of one thing that Amy and I are hoping, you know, from our biweeklies is if we catch, it would bring those points up sooner rather than later. That, by the way, you know, JFAC feels that, you know, we need a, you know, vote from the board on X or consensus from the board on X. Great. Our meeting is now 3 weeks away. Should we call it, you know, should I call a meeting early or not? That type of a thing is some of the things that I think Amy and I are hoping to happen in our biweekly meetings, as well as some other, you know, aspects. But, you know, I think that there's something to be said about sharing, you know, having it be our board responsibility to read through the minutes that are taken. I think having double work done, you know, taking double minutes, you know, Shannon takes the minutes for her, you know, for the PR committee, but then Tom is also taking minutes. It just seems like additional work that's not necessarily needed. But making sure that we're all aware of where they are, maybe when the meetings are and things like that would be really helpful. But creating additional work at this point will just, it'll make things harder. So we need to be really careful of that. But we do, you know, we should be all brought in on, you know, we should all make ourselves, we should do our jobs in educating ourselves of where this is in the process and what each of the areas are doing and things like that, so that nobody's surprised, type of a thing. Um, any other?
Can I assign you all homework?
Yes. Thank you.
So yeah, the executive summary from LaValle, and then Shannon did a really great summary of JFAC's work as well. And those got sent out to the board, right,
Yep.
Shannon? Yep. So if maybe you all could read through those, and if you have any questions or comments, we can answer those at the next meeting. Or if there's questions in between, shoot us an email.
Perfect.
But I think that'll really help you all have a good flavor for the work that's been done.
Amy, so just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, it's the final report is the one that you want to make sure, and that's directly from JFAC.
Yep,
And
and there's an executive summary that was completed by LBA.
okay.
And we can get those fresh in your inbox if you need us to.
They were sent yesterday morning.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. I just want to, well, no.
The master plan link is there as well, Terry. I think, are you looking for the large master plan from LBA that's 206 pages?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing is all. And so I know what you emailed yesterday was slides that we just went over today. It was your final report and then the survey results. And so those are the three things that I downloaded from your email.
Correct, but also in that email, Terry, there's a link because the master plan from LBA is such a large file.
Right.
If you go to the JFAC website, I embedded a link in the email as well. So you can click on that link and that will take you to the master plan. And within that master plan, even though you all may not be serving on the construction cost committee, it is very worth your while to go through the construction cost estimates, which are included in the master plan. And then also included in that master plan, LBA and Harvey provided a very brief summary. That's a great one pager that kind of talks about the work that the construction cost committee did to reduce cost from their first set of estimates, which I think is around 3.1 million was our initial reduction, right, from what they first brought us as a committee. So you can see that at a high level. It's summarized nicely on the first page, and then it's line by line, page by page, every piece of wood that they're estimating, every nut and bolt, and it's fascinating and really, even if you're not serving on that committee, something that's worth spending some time with.
No, absolutely, thank you. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's all. That we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Terry. That's good clarification.
Yep. Before I forget, Amy, are you going to make sure that we all now get added to the subcommittee meetings that might be set up, or do you want me to reach out and have that happen?
Yeah, no, I will do that because, we all had sort of stalled our work. So those committees haven't met in a bit. So Roger is chair of the cost construction. So we'll get going on that, and we'll make sure to add the correct folks. And then for finance, I'll make sure we get invites out for that to touch base on where we are and what we need to get squared away. Because I know we have time, but as Shannon and I spoke, we don't want to act like we have time because it will go before we know it. So we want to pretend that we're shooting for a closer deadline.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, Josh.
Good segue there, Amy, because I wanted to talk about that as well. So I know you gave us some homework, which is good. Do we have, as a board, any directives right now between now and our next meeting for JFAC, or anything for deliberative coming up? We had those flyers I saw briefly when Shannon put up that screen. So I don't know if we want those for deliberative or for voting day or anything like that. So do we have any asks right now as a board for JFAC or for ourselves on this project moving forward?
Yeah, I would say, and then I'll let Shannon speak, really becoming familiar with the work that's been done and those documents that we spoke about. And then maybe looking at the slide presentation, maybe setting up a meeting with Shannon and me and probably Adam and Tom to go through that and make sure you're all set for deliberative. I know we have, more time now, but I think that would be something worthwhile. We want to make sure everything is in there is accurate. Things may change between now and then, but probably at least setting up some time to go over those slides. And then probably really the biggest work right now is going to be on PR. So Shannon, I'm not sure if you have any specific asks at this point.
Or yeah, I feel like I guess my question is I'd like to really refine a calendar with the PR subcommittee, which right now we have penciled in to meet this Wednesday. We wanted to meet with you all tonight and then, see what direction you have for us and go from there. I think establishing a calendar now that we know, okay, we're looking at March of 2022 and everything's going to push out, starting to build that calendar is important. I guess my question for the board, are you looking for an informational direct mail flyer to go to homes prior to your upcoming deliberative? And if so, I guess my curiosity is going to come into play for the construction cost committee and when you're meeting again, because what I don't want to do is have any false starts with the information we put out in the community. We've already put some information out there as a soft launch. I don't want to continue pushing that information if anything is going to change. So from a PR perspective, in my mind, that subcommittee meeting again, to just really make sure that there's nothing else that's changing kind of needs to happen first. I don't know, Amy, if that's.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point.
Fair.
So I would say, yeah, let's engage that committee, Roger, as soon as possible and get that work done so that the PR subcommittee can continue feeling really good about the numbers that they're posting.
Yep. So that, and then, if you just telling us what you need, what your expectation is in terms of direct mailers and community meetings prior to your upcoming deliberative will help kind of set the schedule, I think, on some of those things. And then I would welcome Ellen and Tom as involved members of the PR committee. If I'm missing anything from that standpoint that you would have a question on, to please jump in.
Shannon, turnaround time for printing and things like that. Working on the mental assumption that maybe the cost committee can get together in the next week or so, even in the next couple of weeks. We have a meeting on March 8th. We have a board meeting on March 8th. As we pull some of this together, would a decision about whether or not to do a direct mailing, can we wait until March 8th to do that? Keeping in mind that deliberative is May 4th. So that gives us 2 months to
I would think so. Ellen and Jeannie they were looking, and I know Ellen's done some homework on the print dates and then mailing. Ellen, do you have something more specific on the turnaround?
No, we didn't get to that point, Shannon. We were still producing the mailer and confirming that the district would pay for it with the wording we had set up. So we didn't get that far.
Okay, we can definitely, I can look in.
Can I quickly jump in on that, Beth? Do you mind?
Yeah, because I know you have your hand raised, so I was gonna call on you next.
Yeah, I have another question, but just in this theme, I would suggest potentially that we avoid a mailer around deliberative. I think it could be a little confusing, but I do suggest that at voting day, we have a big party signed up, like a lot of people and a lot of hoopla and a lot of handouts. So we can let everybody know as they're walking out the door, not walking in, that this is what's coming next year. Start getting ready. Here's your first bit of information. I think it could be confusing if we send it out. People may think they're voting on it this year.
I agree with that. I just was actually, my question was more of, rather than a direct mailer, whether a handout at deliberative might have been more helpful, that said, you know, you're not, but at the same time, you have that question of, will people get confused that they're voting
I
on
think
this?
it's, my personal opinion, I think it's confusing. I think voting day is really the day to kind of kick off the next year.
Perfect.
You know, this is what we're presenting. And I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so does that, I think that answered all of the current questions on the table of, you know, which comes first, PR or construction. But I do think getting that information, you know, maybe getting that information together from construction costs first before you guys go too far. However, scheduling meetings and, you know, kind of getting on people's calendars. So, okay.
Beth, my question, sorry if I could just jump in, my hand up question is kind of related to that.
Perfect. I was actually just about to wrap that up and hand it to you, so go right ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So I do want to probably encourage our board to have an in-depth conversation about is you know, what we voted on in November, is that what we're going to bring forward? Are any of the board members shaky on that presentation? Because if that might be the case, we need to address that now before any of this work is done. Because I will pack my bags and leave town if I put together another flyer that is not correct. So I think that's really important. I don't know if anybody's going to be feeling different, but I think an opportunity to have that conversation very soon, maybe tonight, is important.
So I know we had a board meeting, you were not there, but we had a board meeting, I don't remember the date off the top of my head.
Yeah,
2
it
weeks
was
ago.
to review it, yeah.
Where we did actually vote on a, my mind is blanking on the word for it, but where we said that,
Resolution.
thank you, a resolution, we will be moving forward with a plan of similar scope and concept. So, you know, basically doing both of them at the same time. We're not talking about, you know, cutting, you know, huge chunks or anything like that. So the four of us, you know, because we are, you know, the four moving forward that will be voting on this next year, we feel very, very strongly about that. So does that answer your question, Ellen? Perfect. Thank you. Okay.
So Beth, just one quick thing as another means of communication. We have a very active Slack channel for JFAC. So, and I just confirmed with Adam that since it's public, we can add all of you board members to that. So that will help you. You can go back and read, you know, as far back as you want all the information, but we are good about keeping it updated with our agendas and committee notes and minutes. So that will provide you with a wealth of information.
That would be great being added to that. So yep. Thank you. Okay.
Adam, can you have Abby do that? Or awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, plans, ideas for comments? Shannon.
Oh yes, Shannon, that's a great point, Shannon.
Okay, great. So yeah. I know that the Amherst School Board has established a really great regular communication with the Amherst Citizen. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, so that we're not redundant, if you could include this in your monthly editorial, and the PR committee could obviously help, you know, provide, and Tom and Ellen being on the subcommittee, you know, and you guys being so involved. But if that could be, if somewhere in that editorial each month, we can, as a public relations effort, just check that box that something about what we're working on with facilities will be included in each month as part of your editorial. Obviously, you have other things to update the community on as well, but this is a big one. So
that's a great idea. I'll Tom, if you can work with Shannon on when we need like information by, and then even dates of certain meetings or community things and stuff like that. Cause we try to put a thing down at the bottom with upcoming meetings and important dates and stuff.
Yeah, I saw that. That's great.
That'd be a great idea. So, Tom, because you're on the PR committee and also help a lot with editing or writing that letter, I'm putting you in charge of that. So you two can work together. All right. Anything about JFAC? Perfect.
Thank you very much for having us. I think this is a really good start to the next phase. So very much appreciated.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm really glad of how everything worked out tonight. So thank you guys.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Moving on to the master schedules for Clark Wilkins and AMS. I just wanted to kind of prime everybody a little bit on this because Adam dropped a nice little bomb on us last week, which was great and appreciated. So, so I just wanted to let everybody know that, although we'll be discussing it, it's kind of the purpose of this discussion has shifted slightly. So, sorry, that's annoying. Okay, so just a reminder with the discussion on the start times. I wrote it up ahead of time to make sure I am coherent about this. So this conversation is going to be more on the surface level about the master schedules that are being presented and not necessarily on the deep down dive of the merits of which plan we should be going with. The full details of the plan are going to be presented to us at the SAU meeting next week. Adam has hinted at some of the information, but I know a lot more work and math is being done between now and then. So we'll be getting a much more detailed presentation from Adam at the SAU meeting. And we're having like a 2 to 2.5 hour planned discussion specifically about start times at the SAU meeting, all of us together. So tonight we're going to be looking at the plans that the principals have typed up or written up for us for the time change. They, I know Bethany especially, she had specific times in there, much more detailed times. Those can be adjusted, so we don't need to necessarily get into the, too much of the nitty gritty on the specific hour and minute of things. We're looking more at the concepts of this and how these plans that have been drafted can fit into either of the options or really any three of the options that we're being faced with right now. Although the board doesn't necessarily approve or reject a master plan, it technically does fall into, it is helpful for us to have and be a part of the process because it can influence policy and budgeting. So that's something that we need to be, keep in mind. So part of this is on the master plan discussion doesn't necessarily have to mean we take any of the plans that are before us. Because I know Bethany especially has been talking about a waterfall schedule at AMS for a while and has been looking for us to finalize a start time so that she can just move forward with it on that plan. So I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even if we decide not to change the times at all, she would be implementing a waterfall schedule. So this is more of the schedules as a whole. However, I do know some of it does, fall into that start time discussion. We will, for the public, we will not be making any votes tonight on any of this, on any of the time changes or anything. This is just more of a discussion. We'll be discussing the actual benefits or whatever of whatever time schedule we decide to go with or are talking about at our SAU meeting next week. So just to kind of go there. All right, so let's start with Clark Wilkins. You, Anna, you gave us a schedule. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll to it in the agenda. You gave us you gave us a schedule that kind of involves drop-off times and things like that. Like I said, it might change depending on, what we decide to do with an actual start time, but conceptually, this is what it is. I wasn't sure if you had any presentation aspect that you wanted to give us as part of this, or.
Well, first I was going to follow Bethany, and then it would have just.
Oh, do you want me to do that then? I can totally
just kind of flowed that way. Like hers is thick. Mine is like this, like thin. So, I mean, for us, seriously, with the one that's proposed, we're making a slight shift of 25 minutes. So, with the information there, our day definitely is a little bit earlier, but there's nothing really drastic in the way that we would do business. So I again, I think let Bethany take the lead with this. We would do business as normal. What we're doing, it would be a shift to 25 minutes.
Okay. All right. So should we go to Bethany first and then come back if there's any additional questions?
Yeah, come back because that was my whole presentation. So,
okay.
But yes.
All right. Okay, so Bethany, you get to go.
Great. Well, I guess I'll just start by saying that the purposes of a schedule redesign were really multi-purpose. Yes, one of the reasons was looking at the shift in start time, but another was a really strong desire to take a look at the lessons learned from this year and over the past couple of years to make sure that whatever our bell schedule is, it really has students at the center and is really grounded in middle school best practice. We're not an elementary, we're not a high school. The middle level has its own unique developmental needs, and really trying to make sure that we capitalize on that. So a number of the features in the schedule, regardless of start time, would stay in place, including things like the waterfall aspect of it, so that, sometimes learners do best in the afternoon and sometimes they do best in the morning. A waterfall really takes into account that students learn differently at different times of the day and fluctuates across the school week, so that students have a chance to be in different classes and to start the day and to end the day throughout. It also takes a look at lengthening things like the lunch for 7th and 8th grade by 5 minutes. Their lunch and recess is built into that time together, so that they still have that recess at the grade 7 and 8 doesn't count as instructional minutes. So we have to be careful with the time, but that longer lunch, from what we've seen this year of 30 minutes, is really enough time for kids to eat, but also to have some time for recess and movement and things like that. The other piece is that teachers really have expressed an interest and a desire with the longer classes this year, but finding a balance. So, as we did our early schedule work, there are things that are in opposition, right? So one of the priorities and one of the things teachers really said that they loved and wanted us to look at was longer blocks for classes. And at the same time, they also shared that, but we need to meet more often. And so part of what you see in the schedule is really the compromise between those two things of trying to meet in the middle to provide for all of those different needs. So those longer blocks, and therefore specifically the 7th and 8th grade, would remain. Things like making sure that the 7th and 8th grade schedule have blocks in common to really start to. We always have a few students each year who are taking the next grade up math class or another grade up class to really facilitate some of those pieces. So again, just a number of these pieces in here, regardless of the times that you see in the memo, will still be pieces that we'll look to put in place.
Sorry, I was muted. Great. So I know there's a few questions that the board might have regarding this. So Terry?
So on the 5th and 6th, it has a 5-day and a 6-day. Are you decided between those? Are you somehow using both?
Yep. So it's meant to show that the two that have the 5 are the 5th grade schedule. So it would be
Oh,
like
okay.
a day 1, day 2. So that shows, wanted to show a sample of how it would waterfall in 5th and 6th grade, since they only have a STEM teacher and a humanities teacher, what that would look like. So one model, and again, there's areas in here that teachers and grade levels are going to get feedback on. So we could decide on a straight, red, white day schedule, where on red days, your STEM classes in the morning for 5th grade, and on white days, it's in the afternoon. Or it could be something where, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we would go with one, and Tuesday, Thursday, it flips. So, that shows how you would waterfall in 5th grade on the right-hand side there, and how you would waterfall, or on the left-hand side, and how you would waterfall in 6th grade on the right-hand side.
Okay, I was just misreading then. I was
No worries.
thinking one was a 5-day, one was okay, 5th grade, 6th grade.
Yeah.
And I know that reading through the intro to both of them, it's saying that it's trying to allow for kids who have to travel for sports, and no matter when we start, there's going to be some time missed for sports, just because some of them are far ways away. It's about an hour average time to get to a game. So why do I still see so many core classes at the end of the day? I mean, they might be different ones they're missing, but they're still missing core. Why didn't Eagle go as the last thing of the day? Maybe to just, not that it's disposable, but it's not core. It's a little bit easier to make up Eagle than it is to make up missing a core class.
So when we went through some of the initial work, I think it was just over a year ago, looking at the number of early dismissals and things like that, and we looked at the days of the week that they typically fall on, we felt that the waterfall and core could accommodate for those, and there's likely also going to be a shift to later game times and things like that as well, especially
right.
At the middle school level. We don't have too many early dismissals as it is right now, and so it tells us the waterfall would cover for that. But in regards to Eagle, there's a couple of other things too. I'm just scrolling up to it. So one, right now our Eagle is at the same time across the board in our grade levels, and most of our interventionists are scheduled as either 7-8 interventionists or 5-6 interventionists. But having Eagle at the same time really limits the flexibility to the numbers and types of services we can provide, because we still have the same number of staff.
Right.
So by having Eagle staggered like that in the middle of the day and for 7th and 8th grade, and putting in a true smart lunch, the concept is really that Eagle should be a time where students get what they need when they need it. And if you incorporate that with a smart lunch, it opens up some creative options for us for some cross grade level work, but also some work for specific grade levels, because it doesn't completely overlap there. So that's a piece of where they're scheduled. Also, if you move Eagle to the end of the day, it eliminates the commonality between cores in 7th and 8th grade, which then limits the flexibility of students who might be in 7th grade but prepared for an 8th grade class, that flexibility as well. And then also pairing it with lunch. We always have a handful, 1 or 2 students at the 8th grade level who are taking classes up at Souhegan. So we're trying to also create some stability in some places for them to have bigger blocks of time to cross over and take classes across the way. So part of this is built with long range plans in mind, and really how we're supporting those personalized pathways for students. Right. But Eagle is a really, in a non-disrupted school year, Eagle ends up being really heavily used by all of our students, whether it's for interventions for special education, or for students that's just struggling in a particular area, but it's also where all of our retakes and remediation happen, so that it's not coming out of the core time as well.
Okay. No, thank you for explaining.
Of course.
It makes sense once you actually talk about the thought behind it.
Anytime.
All right, Tom, you're next.
So I know that this schedule is still, the times here, we can kind of toss out the times now until we meet later this month and start to analyze things and stretch things out to whatever the length of the day is going to be. My concern for 7th graders would be, my concern for 8th graders would be that they're, and again, this is not disrespecting specials by any means, but they're not the core classes. This would seem to me that when the kids come in, they're going to have 2 hours before they really get started on their day in earnest, when they start, math and all the the core subjects. And then my concern would be by the end of the day, especially on Wednesday, Thursday, a 90-minute class at the end of the day, I feel like you're going to start to lose some of that attention span. Again, I'm thinking just from what my educational abilities were at that point, where by the end of the day, I would certainly lose some of it. So I'd be concerned about that. I think that you can possibly switch around specials in some of these cores, just looking at it. I think there's ways to make that work. And then the other point I had was off the top of my head, I lost it. But it was just overall focusing on when you have late starts, leaving this schedule like this, how this works and breaks down in a late start day, where if it's 2-hour delay, does something get cut, or do you just shrink things? And then, 7th grade would have core classes cut or shrunk, whereas, it may be specials for 8th grade. So those are just my two concerns for that.
Sure. So the way there are a few constraints within our schedule. One of them being that no 2 grade levels can have specials overlap, because we simply don't have the staff to do it. So somebody always has specials at the beginning of the day, and somebody will always have them at the end of the day. So we've done some things similar to this before. And again, there's part of the conversations. Do 7th and 8th grade schedules flip-flop partway through the year, because we're providing services and things across that grade band. As long as you do to one what you do to the other grade, it works out for everything that we're trying to provide. So might it be something where partway through the year that changes, or where every other year it changes, so that students have the benefit of having those different experiences and the different schedules throughout. And the same thing with the lunch. The 8th grade lunch is a little bit late. It is about halfway through the day, but there can be some creative thought there that we'd then bring to the grade levels to decide and discuss again of how that would fall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen?
My thoughts were very similar to Tom's. I think when we're talking about 7th and 8th grade, and Bethany, of course, you make a good point, because there's certain parts of the building that need to be shared all through the day amongst 4 grade levels, which is tricky. So my big thing was consistency in schedule from 7th to 8th grade. I think there's a tendency for every year feels so different. I think there was a time at Sauhegan where literally my kids were like, it's a new schedule this year. We're blue and black and purple now. And it was just so overwhelming. It would be lovely to simplify some of that for parents. But I think also for the kids, for how they generate habits. But on the flip side, I hear what Tom is saying, and I do like that in the trimesters at Sauhegan, well, they were trimesters, I'm not sure they are anymore, that there were always changes happening. I think that freshens it up for kids. So like you were saying with the waterfall schedule, if you're not a morning learner, you're gonna love having specials, right? You're in the gym, you need to just run around, but you're gonna have to, because the real world is coming, you're gonna have to stimulate your brain and learn in the morning. So I see both issues. I think maybe I would also encourage, as I always do, that consistency between 8th grade and Sauhegan. So you talked about the learners who are going over to Sauhegan, and hopefully that will continue to happen and at greater numbers as we move towards a multi-age kind of concept. So looking at 8th grade being more similar to like the freshman schedule, or even on the same kind of concept for that, we all know, I say kindergarten and high school, 2 biggest transitions, maybe college, but they're big transitions. And I think just having some consistency. I love that there's an advisory, because I think that's what Launchpad is, right? Mm-hmm. Is there any way we can call it advisory? Just again, for like that consistency?
So we actually made a really concerted and a really thoughtful decision to not call it advisory, because we didn't want to, I'm missing the word. It's different than Sauhegan's advisory. And Sauhegan has such a long, proud tradition of that advisory that we felt that it was really important that this was its own piece in the middle school, that it has its own identity. And we also found, especially at the middle level, that the term advisory was too broad a term and really carries with it a lot of preconceived notions. And so we've made a really conscious effort to brand Launchpad and what will be happening in there and how it's distinct and special to the middle school, including that when we have Launchpad up and running next year, its intent is to be a multi-age group. So you'll have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders together, and you'll stay with that Launchpad teacher through your whole time at AMS. And bring in, we'll have some bridging activities to bring in the 5th graders and help them become part of Launchpads as the year goes on. So there was a really distinct purpose for that name difference.
Got it. Okay, I thought it was more specific towards kind of trying that out with the 8th graders before they moved over to Sauhegan. So Bethany, I think you just make really good points, and I think this is really challenging. I think it's really, really challenging. And especially when you have teachers like, no, we want a longer schedule, except really, let's meet more. Yeah. And I see on most of your schedules, you know, other than the 8th grade longer classes, there aren't too many long classes, which, you know, so yeah, I don't know how you do it.
It's a real balance. And like I said, there were 5 different proposals we brought forth to our teacher leadership group and our curriculum coordinators. That represented the values that staff put out to differing degrees, right? So some emphasized longer blocks throughout the whole week, and some emphasized short blocks throughout the whole week, but more frequent class meetings. And so through all of their feedback, this one was really narrowed down as the best model that had a little bit of all of it and really encompassed those middle level values. And if I can go back to Tom's point again, to one comment I forgot to make about the longer blocks, is that we've learned a lot this year about what works in longer blocks and what doesn't. But going forward, that's also an area for professional development to talk about how you teach in a longer block, because it can't simply be more of the same. So transitions and designing for longer blocks of time is really, really important. And if you do that well, that student engagement stays really high and allows for deeper level thinking. If you don't plan it thoughtfully and with the right amount of transitions and the types of activities, then it can become really challenging for students. So that will be an important piece going forward, as well as taking what we've learned this year and applying some more professional development to how to use those longer blocks of time.
Hey, Bethany, I just want to end with one question, and certainly tell me if you're not comfortable, but as we head into Thursday and the start time, I guess debate, end time debate, all of it debate, would you mind sharing, because you know the kids, you know the teachers, you know the schedule, you know the middle school, you're their leader, your opinion on either later or earlier?
On which time preference that we'd prefer?
Yes.
Well, you know, I think that no matter what we do, it's a compromise across our schools. And so, you know, we're going to do, you know, the absolute best by kids. I think there's pros and cons to each of those, but I think that it's a conversation that you can't have in context with any one age group, because we are all interconnected, and the decisions we make at the middle school will impact the high school and the elementary school. At the end of the day, I think it's probably, any changes are areas that there'll be compromises on all sides.
Good job not answering.
Oops,
Anna, you're next. Anna,
I know I wasn't on mute. I wasn't on mute.
Excellent. You should be a lawyer, Bethany. Thank you.
All right, Josh, you have had your hand raised for a while.
Yeah, that was a good political answer. I appreciate that. So a few things that I really liked. The balance of the longer blocks, I think, is good. And I think in looking, we've been talking about how do we connect with Sauhegan, and I think that those are the ways, if we do it right, that can start to happen. And I know you mentioned the option of potentially elective model for integrated arts in the older grades, which again starts to give students some choice and some voice. I don't know if you've had any more conversations about what that would look like, but I'd be interested to hear more about the vision for something like that.
Sure. So I've definitely turned that over to our integrated arts teachers to start to play with and see what that model might look like. Again, it's this interesting compromise, I think, at the middle level, because a lot of research on middle level best practice says expose kids to everything you possibly can for as many years as possible in those middle ages, which means give them everything. But at the same time, there's the debate, is giving them the breadth of choices better than allowing them to dig deep into something that they might be really passionate and interested about? Is that right age high school? Is that right age 7th and 8th grade? So it's this internal debate that we're continuing to have too at the middle school. But I think there is an interest in it. And the question becomes, do we have the staffing to really allow for that integrated model and that elective model? Right now, and you've heard our conversations as a board about world language currently being part of the specials, because we want to make sure we're doing world language well. That also limits some of what we're able to do within integrated arts, because world language does need to be a year-long class. World language, wellness, and PE and music really should be year-long electives. I couldn't find a middle school out there that does fewer than 2 elective blocks in their schedule every day, which creates some of those constraints as well. But that's a conversation that's continuing. And in fact, our integrated arts department is meeting at their department meeting on Wednesday this week to talk about it more and see if there are some viable options for us to explore and what they might look like. So the short answer is we're working on it. I don't have a full update there yet, but I've really turned it over to the educators that are teaching those courses to advise us on what they feel like is best practice and what possibilities we'll have for the middle school.
Awesome. Well, either way, I think it's a good idea. So I'm glad we're at least exploring it. With Launchpad, I know that that's been not as we envisioned it given COVID. So is the vision next year to go to a integrated multi-level kind of situation?
Yes. Yep. And then that's another place that we'll circle back and do some more PD on probably over the summer and then leading into school in the fall. And really, I've talked a little bit with Sue Sprinkle, who had a sabbatical, if you remember, last year to really research this program and decide on and really roll it out. That we'll need to do a little bit of a rebranding and a relaunch, because we've had to make some compromises this year with it that we don't want to make going forward, but have been necessary in the COVID reality of our day-to-day lives. But there are so many great points about it and really being that anchoring place for kids this year. So while it's not perfect, we're really, really grateful that we made it a priority to put that piece in for this year.
I'll let Terry take over.
Hey, Terry.
Fawn passed. Okay, for one, I would like to say that I really appreciate hearing some of what you didn't do. And being able to preempt our what about, it's like, oh, no, we already talked about that, thanks. Because it's helpful to sort of see, just when you start putting it all on the table, it is really complex and it does all touch each other. And knowing, okay, great, wouldn't it be nice if nobody had to start or end day with this, but somebody has to, like, knowing that I think is really essential. I think that Launchpad, I'm excited to hear where you envision it going. And I would really like us to maybe make sure, this is just a suggestion, but a strong one, that you really educate parents, and it's going to take more than once, as you know, but educate them on what's the difference, because I really hear sort of that, oh, I can, and Eagle will just throw away periods. So it's just study hall. It's like kind of yes, but no, not really, because it really is that time where you can dive down. It's a time where that teachers are available, that that you don't have to, you maybe can't advocate for yourself where you're going to go, okay, after class, after school, I'm going to meet you and it's just going to be the two of us, and that's really intimidating. But if it's during this time that's meant for it anyway, they could really take full advantage and feel less singled out. And so I think that really showing the thought that goes into how to use that time and examples of how it gets used, I think would go a long way. Because right now, as a parent, if I'm looking at the schedule, I'm probably going to feel very differently than somebody who has been behind the scenes a little more and has a feel for how those things get used. And so I would say, just because each student is so different, parents judge it by what their own kid does with it. And they may have a perception that's not entirely fair. And so I think that we have a real opportunity to say, no, here's both what we have done, here's where we're hoping to go to, and here's why. And I think that those things are really, really helpful.
Absolutely. And recognizing again that part of it is we're not doing everything that we want to be doing with those times this year because of the health and safety constraints we've had put in place too.
But I think that even something like Launchpad, like I look at that and I see it first time of the day and I go, oh, grown up morning meeting, but it's really not. It kind of is, yeah, you are starting your day, you are doing some things that have a little bit of ritual to them, I suppose, and touching base. But especially if you start mixing ages, you have that continuity, and you have an adult that knows a child very well across multiple years. So I think that this year it's probably slightly more like a morning meeting because it's probably going to be within your own, cohort of people. But I think that going forward, it gets to be something really exciting. Both of them have value, but again, if I was a parent, I'd go, oh, great, I had an elementary and we started morning meetings and we get to do this in middle school too. Great. Like, I just think it's the same thing and is very much not the exact same thing. So yeah, there you go. I will stop talking, I promise.
So Bethany, can we put you on the schedule? You can let me know when you're ready once, each group has had their discussion about this, but to kind of come back and talk about the integrated arts. And, even if it's May, maybe. To
Yeah,
talk about that.
we're hoping to have it kind of wrapped up by late April, because that's when we'd need to, if we are going to do electives, we need to get those options out to families so that we have time to actually schedule everyone. But I'll definitely provide an update for you going forward.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if you can just talk to us about what that plan is and, not necessarily for approval, but just, to update.
Sure.
And then also maybe to circle back around on the launch pad, because I know we had talked last year about what it was supposed to be, and then obviously it had to change this year. But maybe discussing some of what you learned from this year that worked great, what you really want to be able to go back to. I know you really want to be able to do that multi-grade level thing, which I think would be amazing. But maybe, figuring out what worked and what didn't, and kind of telling us again, like what is going to change based, because we know what you originally planned on it being, but after 1 year of it not being the way it was supposed to, does your idea change at all? So we could maybe do those in the same meeting or not, but we'll put you on the schedule whenever you're ready for it. So
Sure.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Happy to.
All right. So we did blow by Anna without questions, but I do want to come back now, now that she's seen what we're asking. Does anybody have any questions for Anna, or does Anna have anything else to add about her schedule?
So again, I think we need to take a look at ours and what the premise was for the change in start time for middle and high school. What is proposed and what we're able to do with a 25-minute difference. Really, as I said, it doesn't change a whole lot for us and what we're trying to do in time-wise with the teachers. So with this proposal, you can see for us, it's a doable 25-minute swing. Thank you, Adam.
Josh.
Yep. Oh, Adam keeps shifting where things are on my screen. Okay, so I guess the one question, and
Sure.
I don't know if we want to get into this tonight or wait, but is there a difference depending on where we all land with the amount of time we can offer for lunch and recess on these schedules? That is something that I would be interested to hear about, and whether or not we have some flexibility to offer more recess to our kids depending on the where we land.
I'm assuming you're asking Anna.
Yes.
So again, I think with the proposed schedule, it is the same amount of time that we have this year. So if we were to add more time in recess, then it would take away from instructional time and the other things that are happening right now. So I know we added 5 minutes the year I came to the lunch recess schedule.
So we're at 25 now, right?
But Ellen, if we are using our outdoor facilities too, there's that opportunity to have it be incorporated in some of the things we're doing instead of just saying it's recess, more thinking about outdoor in a different way.
Anna, we're at 25 minutes, right?
25 minutes different. Yeah. Oh yeah, at lunch, yes.
Thank you. Ellen?
So we're at 25 minutes. Sorry, thank you, Beth. 25-minute lunch, 25-minute recess?
Yeah.
Or 30-minute recess?
25, 25.
Oh, okay. So, so Josh's question is really then, how do we impede upon our instructional time to get more for an elongated recess so that students have time to play, get their play organized and not have to cut it short to come in at their highest energy level for all those teachers. And so I would actually, while we're just talking, I know we're just talking about start times right now, but I would love, Beth, I'll touch base with you about maybe potentially starting another focus on increasing that recess time and not really having it be in the instructional part of the outdoor classrooms, because right, that's really still adult led, but have it be more child led recess that is longer. So, and I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm just thinking out loud. So
Sure.
Beth, I'll reach out to you. Is that okay?
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Tom?
I also have you in for the next outdoor classroom at Wilkins too. So
I'm ready.
yeah, we could talk about both.
Okay.
Tom?
Much like Ellen, just thinking out loud, not a decision
Sure.
for tonight by any means, or it doesn't even really need an explanation, but just a point of reference that the schedule that Adam had talked about, kind of the option 3 in the video that he sent out on Friday, is not a 25-minute difference in terms of start time. It's actually a shorter day. And I know we'd be adding days at the end of the year. So you're looking at right now, it's about 7:05 for the length of day, roughly 6.5 to 6:45 on the option 3. So you're losing a chunk of 45 minutes. So that certainly is going to make adding lunch and recess time more difficult with the loss of instruction time, even if you do have an extended school year. So we can talk about that on the 18th when a more formalized plan is ready, but that is a big concern and something to think about as we look at those calendars.
Yep.
All right. Terry?
This isn't necessarily for Anna. It's kind of a combo. Looking at integrated arts, is there any capacity to maybe having a stipend and adding some after school options? Because we already have a really vibrant, on a normal year, we have a very vibrant elective set of things to do after school. If there's maybe something that we don't think that we could fit into the regular day, I do think that we do still have stipends set aside for some after school things. And could we maybe try out some of the things there and then expand them if they go well? Just throwing it out as an idea before you have your discussion, because I do think that we set some money for stipends and we always have at least a few things that are going on after. And so maybe it's even looking at maybe stopping some of the ones that don't have high attendance and trying some new ones and playing around with that a little bit. But I think it gives us a little more room to play with.
We do offer, there are actually a whole bunch of integrated arts ones after school that we offer, for everything from robotics to cooking club to, there's some
We have some
pottery,
amazing
things like
ones.
that. So yeah.
And so that might be a way to just, and I think also sometimes the kids don't, I could tell you that having a freshman this year, she'd finally gotten pretty straight on what was available at the middle school, but it took a little bit of ramp up time to really figure out, okay, how do I reach out and say, I want to go right for the claw? How do I do that? Like I see they're there, but how do I jump in? And so if any of that changes, and especially because we've had a weird year, I think really making sure we educate our students on how to jump into opportunities. And it may seem obvious and there's a list, but they don't always. Sometimes you have to lead them a little firmer to the water before they'll drink.
All right, Josh?
Yeah, so one last thing that I wanted to touch on. I think one of the great things that has happened in this year has been the integration of the integrated arts at the elementary school. Those videos are fun and enjoyable. And so I don't know if there's any thought or vision of ways to keep them occasionally working together, because I feel like there has been such a joyful experience coming out of that. So just a thought, and just a shout out to them, who they've been doing great work to engage our kids. So
They could have their own PBS, we said, channel with
yes.
their videos. It's truly unbelievable. So I did get that question, and things for us to think about it and theme based. So definitely something we'll have conversation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for Anna or Bethany regarding this topic? No. Okay. So I think we are all set with that. We are going to move on to subcommittee reports. So this fell off. This was fell off. So that's why it's at the bottom versus at the top. From here on out, it's going to be back up at the top like usual. So I did just want, Josh actually has a communications committee mini presentation to do. And then that's actually going to go into a deeper, longer discussion next week. He just wants to get us started and get us thinking, so that we can actually have a detailed discussion about it next week. But I did really quick want to update, which involves actually communications, which is why I'm throwing this information here. So with emails, with board emails that, or emails that come into the entire board, a question was sent out asking if we can include everybody on the reply. And I just wanted to update everybody at the same time on that particular email address and how it works. So currently, let me see, we currently have an email address that gets sent to all board members as well as the superintendent. It was recently brought to our attention that any email that's sent to that email, as well as any email that is sent to the majority of the board, needs to be entered into the minutes. This process has started and will continue from here on out. It has been asked that any replies be sent to the full board. I do want to let everybody know that that is not allowed per statute, and that this can be handled in a couple of different ways that the board needs to discuss and decide on. One, the board can elect a spokesperson to answer on behalf of the entire board. Currently, under policy BBAB/BDB, this is the job of the chairperson, but the board can also vote to move this responsibility to somebody else. Again, this person would reply to the emails. It would not be a reply to everybody. It would just be to the sender. Also, if it is wished that the board does not wish to use a spokesperson, or that the chair or a board member feels that they need, sorry, let me start that again. If the board does not wish to use a spokesperson or have the chairperson act as the spokesperson for these emails, email replies, or if a board member feels that they want or need to respond themselves, you are allowed to. You're allowed to respond individually to the sender. You're not allowed to send it to everybody. But it must be very clearly stated in each and every email that the reply is your own personal response and opinion. It is not necessarily the opinion of the board. Only the chairperson or an elected spokesperson is allowed to speak on behalf of the board. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. For the chairperson or the spokesperson, if it is decided that they will be the ones replying to emails, the emails should not be used as an open dialogue with the community. Currently, people are being thanked for their feedback, questions, etc., and being told that they're email is being entered into the public record. You can share links to agendas, minutes, prior meetings, things like that, but it needs to all be factual information that is available to the public at large. Moving too far from this opens the door for misinformation and lack of transparency for someone that didn't think to ask that question. Additionally, adding more commentary could move it away from the board stance and into something that's in the realm of personal opinion and needs to be labeled as such. So I just wanted to update everybody on that. For the board, for the policies that I referenced, they are all B policies, and they're referenced under the, they're on the website under the Amherst policies section. So we can do that. Ellen, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Beth. So, okay, so the emails that come through the ASB email, or I guess maybe the SAU directly to the chair, are now being entered into the minutes of the next meeting. Is that how it works?
Yes.
Following meeting? Okay. So do community members understand that? Because then am I wrong? Doesn't it then become a public, it's a part of a public document, so anybody could then go back and read the email that a community member sent? So how does everybody feel about that? I mean, I think that should be clearly stated somewhere, because I don't think a lot of people, certainly, I know it's new, I'm not saying that it should have been, but you know, people put personal information in those emails. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
I didn't want to cut you off when you're done.
No, yeah. So I know that's new, so I'm just looking for clarification, because I know Steve had mentioned it and I asked you for clarification, so I didn't know about that. So I think that's really tricky. And then on the conversation that we're having about who responds, I agree that just one person should respond, but I don't like sort of being blind to what the response was. So we see an email that has a question. We by no means want to individually answer them. I think that would be confusing and not great. And I think the decision was made long ago that the chair would handle it, or Adam. But I don't like not knowing what or how the board was represented in the reply. So how could we establish that line of communication without creating a board meeting or whatever? Because I think Tom agreed, there have been times when people have approached me and said, oh, you know, I didn't hear from you, or I didn't hear from anybody. And I've said, you should get a response from Adam or our chair. But it's awfully weird knowing that people got a response that represents the board, but not knowing what the response was. Does that make sense?
Adam, I know Adam, you had a thought. Do you want to?
Yeah, so generally every communication that goes through the SAU email server is a public record. The exceptions are if there's something clearly relating to a student or a personnel issue, but there's limited exceptions to that. So if a community member emails the board and states their opinion for or against a particular issue, that's a public record. That's discoverable, and that's something that would be.
But Adam, it will now be in minutes. So how would it have been discoverable prior to putting it in the minutes?
If someone made an RSA 91A request or a Freedom of Information Act request for those emails, they would have been provided.
Okay, do you agree that it changes how people might feel about sending an email to the ASB once they know that's going to be entered into minutes? I mean, granted, I don't know how many people read the minutes, but it's certainly a more public way to gain access.
I'm not sure how to qualify how I think people might feel, but I can say that that is a pretty typical practice for most boards, that when they receive a piece of correspondence, whether by letter or by email, that it's usually entered and added to minutes. Legislatively, the state does that as well. They typically don't read letters that they receive publicly because that would add certainly a lot of length to the meeting, but that is a typical practice, I would say. So
Okay.
I know what you're saying, that some people might think that they're having
Yeah.
a chance to express a kind of a private opinion to the board, but unfortunately that's not allowable.
So then are the responses then put in the minutes? So would that be a way that we could all see what the response was?
Well, maybe, maybe not. So if the response is sent to the entire board as well, then that should be entered into the minutes as well. If one member of the board responds on behalf of the board, it's not necessarily something that constitutes a meeting or something that is added to minutes, but it could be. The board could also make policy about that as well, of course.
So how do you solve, it might just be my issue. Tom had agreed when I put it out there. How do you solve the problem of, the line of communication kind of ends with the question?
Yeah, so I think it's, so if a member of the public emails the board and the whole board gets it, if there's a spokesperson on behalf of the board that responds the board's official position, I don't see an issue with the entire board receiving that response. If Ellen, as an individual member of the school board, responds to that constituent with Ellen's personal opinion, that doesn't necessarily have to go to the rest of the other members of the board. What's discouraged is when members of the board are having communication where they're deciding issues or discussing topics amongst themselves, and the public is shielded from that discussion of the board. So the purpose of 91A is to make sure that the public sees the board do its business in public and not behind the scenes. So a communication that goes to the board and then a response from a board member back to the public, the board isn't making any decisions or conducting any business in private. And so that's generally would be allowable.
Okay. So can I ask that is how we do it moving forward? Because I think it's great that we have a spokesperson, or I think we decided it was going to be Beth. Can we, moving forward, be CC'd or whatever, be CC'd on the reply?
I just want to be clear. So what can't happen is Beth, as spokesperson, can't say, how do the rest of you feel about what I'm about to say to this person? Right?
Yeah, I'm clear. Just the response. So you're not caught off guard by what a community member says, oh, hey, this was the response. You're like, I don't see the responses. It's awkward. So can we do, Beth, I think, did we establish you? We don't have another spokesperson, do we?
Another spokesperson has not been decided for this particular concept.
And I'm not looking for that. I think it's fine that the chair is responding, but can we, moving forward, see what your response is to the email questions?
Yeah, so Adam, if I do that, do all responses have to be included in the minutes as well?
It's probably the best thing to do. It's probably the exception would be if someone asks about a specific issue with their student, or there's a medical, all the clear things that are exceptions to the right to know law. But there's nothing that would preclude those messages from being included in the minutes as well. So you certainly could do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Josh.
Yeah, so I had a possible solution, but it seems like we solved it, so good. So do you want me to give the preview trailer for our future meetings discussion?
Perfect.
Okay. So if I can quickly share my screen. Is it gonna let me do that? There it is. Okay, are you guys seeing these slides at this point?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking ahead to this next meeting, and I will share these out. That is allowed, right? That I can share these now as a deck to people. Okay, good. I'll share these out so people can look at them and we can be prepared to have a discussion. But some things to think about, some questions that I think we should be talking about is whether or not this should be a full-fledged committee. Refining some of the ways that we currently communicate, letters to the editor. We just refined how we handle emails. Maybe there's some further refinement. I'll look at that. And then what platforms are we using? And I just think this is something that we should maybe take a little bit of a deeper dive as we prepare to work with JFAC on the bond, making sure that we're all clear. And I can stop sharing, but I don't actually know how to stop sharing. Hold on, we'll get it. I get my 8th grader in here, and then
It's at the top, I think, maybe.
Okay. Can you stop me from sharing?
Maybe.
Pause share. Did that do it?
Yeah.
There we go. So, so just moving forward, thinking about that we're all on the same page with communication. So I'll share those slides out. We can go a little deeper next month into how we want to do that moving forward, and any other of these kind of conversations that I do think are important, because I think we all want to be on the same page with this kind of stuff. So we already checked off one of the things that I had on my slides, so that's great. But we can go over a few more things in the coming months.
Okay. So what Josh said, so Josh is sending over this deck to everybody so that everybody can see the questions and things, everything that he had in there. And you can ruminate on it over the next month. And then we're actually going to have an in-depth discussion on this at our next meeting. We're looking, 20, 25 minutes for this topic alone for us to actually come up with some answers to these questions that the board agrees on. So they have the communications committee or communications in general has a place to go from here. So, okay. We are on to our last public comment of the evening. If any members of the public wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature. I'm going to give it just a minute. Okay. Oh, Adam.
Yeah, just something really brief I wanted to mention. One of our teachers at the Clark Wilkins Elementary School was nominated for the New Hampshire Teacher of the Year process. And so Victoria Boothroyd, one of our longtime elementary teachers, has been nominated for that honor. And we're extremely proud of Victoria for that and wish her the very best of luck in that process. So congratulations, Victoria.
Congratulations. All right. Any other public comment? All right. So seeing none, we do have a non-public session tonight under RSA 91A:3 to C. So can I have a motion to go into non-public under that?
I'll make a motion to go into non-public under said RSA.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Terry. Let's roll call. Josh?
Conklin, yes.
Tom?
Gothier, yes.
Ellen?
Gruden, yes.
Terry?
Beam, yes.
And Kuzma, yes.